In this module, let's talk a little bit more about the back-end keywords. These are the keywords and the data that the customer actually doesn't see, but Amazon allows you to add to supplement your listing, to help it index better, to help it sort better, to help it filter better. So that's what the back-end is. This is the part of Seller Central where you can actually enter some additional information to supplement your listing. What you actually see in the back of this section varies by the category. So in some categories, you'll see a whole laundry list of fields. Other categories, there'll be a much more limited list of fields. You don't have to fill everything in, but you want to fill in as many as you can that are relevant to your product. Some of it won't be relevant at all, but anything that's relevant to your product, you want to fill in as best as you possibly can. Now, if you don't see everything, when you first log into the GUI, you actually can click the Advanced View. If you click Advanced View, the little tab there, it'll actually open up and it'll show you some additional information. Or if you're using a flat file or the Excel files that you can upload the information to Amazon, you'll have everything in those files. But that's a whole different animal that it's a little bit more advanced. That we'll leave that for Helium 10 Elite. So most of you are going to use the actual GUI when you're actually entering your products for the first time. Amazon also recognizes most plurals and word stems. So for example, they'll often recognize the word cat and cats as the same word. They'll also often recognize the word like end and ended as the same word. So you don't always have to repeat all those words because they'll recognize those as part of the root of it when you're dealing with the back end. Now, you don't need to repeat things over and over in the back end. The field you want to focus the most attention on in the back end is called search terms. And this one is limited to 250 bytes, actually not characters, but bytes. And bytes are how much space a character takes up in the computer's memory. And so, for example, in Enye, the N with a little scribbly line over the top of it in Spanish is actually 2 bytes. A space is a byte. A comma is a byte. So you're limited to 250 bytes. The listing optimization tool that Helium 10 has will actually help you make sure you stay within that limit, because if you actually go over, the entire list of search terms actually may not be indexed. Now, what you want to put in these search terms, the additional data that you couldn't get in your listing. You don't need to repeat anything from your title or from your bullet points or your description. So whatever you didn't use there, but it's still relevant, that could be some misspellings, it could be some alternate slang terms, it could be some of your other brand names, Spanish words that are relevant to your product. It could be some sort of sizing issues or some SKU type of things if people are searching for that. Those are the kinds of things you want to put in the search term field. You don't need to repeat anything from the front, and you don't need to repeat anything in the search term field itself. You can separate these by spaces. I would not separate them by commas because that takes up an extra byte. So just separate each one of them by spaces, and that's good enough. Even if you have a 2-word keyword and the next one is 2-word keywords, it's going to be word space word space word space word. That's totally fine. You also want to make sure you don't use propositions like a and the or and or any of those kind of words. Those are totally not necessary. Also, be sure you don't use any restricted or prohibited words in the back end either. Other words you want to be careful with are words like best or most popular or fastest or amazing. Those type of words should not be used in any of your keywords or any of your listing either. Another thing you got to be very careful of is not to use brand names. Unless the brand name is yours, don't use your competitors' brand names. Don't use other big name brand names in the back end in any of your search term fields, or for that matter, anywhere in your listing. If you do need to use a brand name because maybe you have a product that goes with a brand name, for example, if it's an iPhone charger, you actually cannot say iPhone charger on Amazon, because that would infer that it's made by Apple because it says iPhone charger. But what you can say is charger compatible with iPhone. So something like that, if you need to use a brand name, would be okay. But just sticking the brand name back there for the sake of sticking it back there, hoping to get indexed or show up in some of the pages of another brand, is a big no-no on Amazon. Another thing you need to keep in mind on the back end, other than the search term field, or there's a lot of other fields that you should fill in, such as color or material or country it's made in, or there's some others like warnings or alerts or warranties, dimensions. The dimensions, you should fill it in, your package dimensions and your product dimensions. Amazon may override this when the first time you actually ship something into Amazon. They'll remeasure it and they may update that. But I would go ahead and enter that stuff in there as well. Your product's weight, your intended use, other attributes, all those kinds of things you should fill in. You may see a field called Platinum Keywords. If you see that field, you can leave that out. That's an old legacy thing from the old days, and very few people can use that. Amazon, if you put something in there, Amazon will just ignore it. So don't worry about that platinum keywords field. So that's some of the important information you need to know about the back end. Hopefully this has helped you, and we'll see you again in the next module.